Hello, everyone. I'm joined by Kavitha, who is a female trailblazer in technology field with 20 plus years of industry experience. As EVP at Zscaler, Kavitha drives global transformation and innovation across many different sectors, including business, customers, strategy, product, and more, with a strong focus and emphasis on advocacy and equity. Thank you so much, Kavitha, for joining me today. A little bit of background on what I do here at Chicode in our nonprofit. We work with many different students from many different backgrounds, age groups, and skill levels to kind of incorporate technology into their daily lives and the work that they do. For example, we have students who are refugee women from Greece and the Congo who are looking to incorporate any form of tech into their work and photography business. And we have students, for example, from orphanages in India who are just starting their career in technology. So, on the topic of careers, my first question is, can you share your career journey very briefly and what actually motivated you to enter the tech industry?
Now, well, first and foremost, I wanted to thank you for having me here. I also wanted to thank many of the students who I believe had contributed questions for today. I also want to take just a second to commend you on the work that you're doing with Chicode. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of courage to do the kind of work that you're doing, and and not-for-profits are such a labor of love. So, well done. Congratulations on doing that. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to be here. So let's talk about my career journey briefly. You were very kind when you said 20 plus years. Actually, in 4 weeks, 5 weeks, I would have been in the industry for 30 years. I would be hitting my 30 years from when I graduated from my undergrad in engineering in Australia. I did grad school, all grad school while I was working during the course of my career. But 30 years, and it's fascinating to see where things were in the 90s, right? When I graduated to where they are today. I see a lot of differences and I see a lot of parallels. What got me going in this? I was always a STEM kid, but not inclusively STEM, meaning I love philosophy, literature, classics, and I am also a classical pianist. That said, I was a STEM kid. I love math. I love science. I love tinkering with stuff, like figuring out things worked. I grew up in Australia and was born in Malaysia, grew up in Australia. So I have very humble beginnings, didn't have a lot of like fancy toys, So as a kid, always made your toys. And I was very, and I guess motivated by the tinkering, right? And my father being a doctor always wanted me to be a doctor, and obviously being a rebel, I didn't want to do what he wanted me to do. So being a STEM kid, being rebellious to my Indian father, the natural progression was I chose to study engineering. And in those days, the fields of engineering were quite traditional, right? You had chemical, civil, mechanical, electrical, et cetera. You didn't have like all these other sort of cross-domain, subdomain, and specializations. But there was an emerging specialization around electronics engineering, which is, so power electrical had always been there, microelectronics, as well as communications, and was the early, I would say, like early days of awarding computer science degrees, computer science degrees. So I chose to go study electronics and communications engineering. And at that point, my dad's like, okay, it's one thing, you don't want to be a doctor. You want to go be an engineer. Why couldn't you do something traditional? You're not going to have a job when you graduate. And I was like, no, it's supposed to be these new fields and great things are going to happen. And again, a little bit of a risk taker. I wanted to do something different. I loved the subject matter and the content. And 30 years on, Nelly, I have to say, I'm so glad I chose the road less traveled. It has been a phenomenal journey.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think uh, on that topic, there are so many emerging fields in technology people are hesitant to join just because there's no path that's been carved out. But I think that is the opportunity to be able to carve that path. And talking about carving the path, what are some of like the biggest challenges you faced, especially early in your career? As you mentioned, not a lot of females, not a lot of minority groups in the technology space.
Yeah, so if I had a magic ball to look at and say, wow, 30 years on, the world would be in a very different place, and we would be sitting here having conversations not about diversity and inclusion, that we would have more than 50% or 50% enrollment of women and minority students and non-binary students in some of these, more traditional fields.
Right.
One, and that is also reflected in the workforce. I would be so happy to be able to say that, but we're not there. And I didn't think 30 years ago I'd be sitting here 30 years on, and we would still be having these conversations. And so those challenges I faced are still some of the many challenges many of you face. One is you're the minority, as especially being as a girl, a person of color, in a traditional field that, was not very welcome. I never felt very welcome. So you always had to figure out how to take your seat. Two, it was also a time when people didn't talk about diversity and inclusion. So it wasn't a thing. You really needed to fit in. Okay.
Right.
You didn't want to be different. You wanted to fit in. And we don't want to fit in. Nobody wants to be different. We're just
Right.
human beings,
Yep.
right? With same goals, motivation, desires, ambitions, mission to do good, in the world, right? And for ourselves. But those were very similar challenges. And I realized as I went into the workforce, those challenges were even more persistent because at least as a student, kind of like, you have family support, all, maybe faculty support, and then you go into the work and you see more women in faculty, at least around the university.
Right.
You go into the workforce and you really don't see, especially in these traditional jobs. So many years of my career I had spent being the only one in the room, the only one in the meeting, only one on the project. And as I realized, as I kind of ascended, my career ladder, that got even narrower. The field got even narrower. There were fewer and fewer women. There were fewer women to look up to as role models, to aspire to, and to say, "Oh, I want to be like that. Maybe I could pursue that. Maybe I could ask for advice." So you have to be a little bit of a survivor, right? And so some of the challenges were to figure out, well, there aren't any role models that model the type of behavior or aspirations that I have, but I got to figure this out. So it's really, you know, trying to figure out how to take your place at a seat at the table, to be accepted. So you have imposter syndrome a lot. I'm like, do I really deserve to be here? Am I here
Yep.
because I'm a girl? And then
Yeah.
if I screw up, people are going to say it's because I'm a girl. And it's all those things, right?
Yep.
And society reinforces that. But it was also to say, well, I've got to use what I've got, right? And if there are no women there, I'm going to leverage male mentors. I'm going to leverage male bosses. I'm going to still be the best player, not the best guy or girl on the
Yep.
project, best player. So those were, some of the challenges. And I think I want to also talk a little bit about ageism, right? Ageism is there. And funnily enough, ageism persists a lot for, I would say, women of color and women of Asian descent and South Asian descent. Often being overlooked for promotions and things like that because you look younger. And it's like, well, you've got time, you look younger, it's okay. And it's like, well, we don't look at a man or a guy and go, well, he looks younger, so this perception that, it's okay, we'll give it to him the next round. I did face some of that, and I have faced some of that. And so earlier on, take the bull by the horns is kind of how I overcame them, but it doesn't, that's not a strategy that fits for everybody. But it was kind of really honing into my deep survival, instincts and my work ethic, and it's kind of how I circumvented some of that.
On that topic, when we had that panel discussion over the summer, you
Yeah.
mentioned that one thing that you did that really made people take you seriously was honing in on your craft. Like your skill cannot be doubted, no matter if you're a minority group or like wherever you hail from. So on that topic, are there any specific skills or experiences you think are crucial for women or any kind of minority group entering the tech field?
Yeah. Look, I think it applies to any field, right? You've got to be really good at what you do, guys, girls, anybody, right? Like, and I think because we have the imposter syndrome, because you feel like the eyes are on you, and some of that is our own, I would say, our own perception, right? And it may not be true, and the rest is imposed on us. It's
Right.
really to put in, double down, and make that effort because I do believe the payoffs are going to be exponential. It might feel like I'm doing a lot more heavy lifting than others because I've got to prove why I'm in this room,
Right.
right? But it helps no matter what, right? So figure out whatever it is. I mean, if you're in data science, well, figure out how you want to double down, take the extra classes, do those internships, do those projects, do all those types of things, seek mentors, do
Mm,
crossovers between academia and industry as much
mm,
as possible. Because as you know, I think you probably you hear from a lot of graduating students who've just graduated, and seniors who are like considering graduating. I have a college senior. My oldest daughter is actually a college senior. She'll be
mm,
entering the workforce, in next summer, next fall. And there's this impending fear of, oh, I've been in college now for 4 years, nearly 4 years, right? And I'm gonna have to enter this big bad world. I may come out with an awesome degree with good grades, and might have done some internships. How does that fit in the workforce? So it's really starting to think about bridging, and I know it's very overwhelming.
mm,
Lots of responsibilities, lots of anxiety around what this looks like, but it will land. It is just a question of how does it land, right? How are you going to smooth that path for yourselves?
mm.
And I do believe real world experience meshed with academic experience is one. Two is, as esoteric as things are, learning some of the most unique, difficult to learn things, make you unique, right? The one person that is, has a patent that created X, make
Right.
yourself super unique. And I think those are some ways to anybody really crucial for entering tech, science, STEM, vocations in general.
So on the topic of like entering the workforce where you have to navigate just so many different opportunities and possibilities, what kind of emerging trends in tech do you see that you're excited about? Like what opportunities do you think are out there that we probably haven't anticipated yet?
Yeah, look, I think what an exciting time. And I say this like it's funny. Um, the last, I mean, as you look at the journey, right? Look, we would never have thought the internet, for you all, you were born after the internet, but I'm just saying for those of us who are like older, the internet was not a thing we thought was going to be game changer. It is a game changer. Cloud technologies are game changing, right? And now we're sitting there on the precipice of um, artificial intelligence. Now, machine learning's always been there for years, decades.
Mhm,
But it's this sophistication of machine learning algorithms,
mhm,
human machine cognition, the advent of generative AI. I mean, all of this, deterministic AI, generative AI, all of these types of things, as we think about it, wow, the ability to do things, to innovate, not just cool things, but the fact that we can do things that will actually help with healthcare, help with, perhaps, bringing resources to the underprivileged,
mhm.
helping with disaster relief, better, helping in so many ways, right? I actually was watching a video the other day, a brief video on remote surgery being done completely, and this was a 5 hour
Wow.
surgery being done by I believe a cardiologist, real subspecialty, super specialty, completely remotely using robotics
Wow.
in in China, and it was a patient that was in like some remote region.
Mm,
They had, the control systems, all of that to build the robotics precision, all of that that needed to be done. What are the things that we can do with that? So as I think about all of that, I
mhm,
think about also I work in cybersecurity, obviously. Um, the ability for innovation to be exploited, right? For technology to be exploited. I read this really fantastic quote that I used yesterday when I was on a panel. And, you know, um, it was really interesting to think about technology has no moral value until it is applied.
mm. Okay.
Right? And when
Yep.
we kind of just stop and think about it, it's what is that weight there that it bears? And so in my field, obviously, as tech, as AI, as all of these things, cloud, mobility, IoT, OT, all these things become our way of life.
Mhm,
The bad guys are also
mhm.
taking advantage or accelerate, it's helping them accelerate
True.
their ability to be nefarious, right? And so we have to start thinking about ways to combat this as we live our lives
Right.
digitally. We bank our food buying, our preferences, our credentials, everything is online. We really have to start thinking about how that can be taken advantage of, how so much of our lives, our personal identifiable information, our everything is going to be exploited, right? For very, very bad, nefarious purposes
Right.
by threat actors. So as I think about these trends, I also think about the opportunity to create great tech and the
Mm,
opportunity and the responsibility for us to use it, in a way that there are moral, ethical implications, and then also to be mission driven in how we take tech and do great things with it. So these are some of the, like the amazing trends that we're seeing right out there.
agreed, agreed. I think there's definitely not one right path or like one way to find success, but I think definitely looking up to people like you who have carved a path for themselves is something that's just a source of inspiration for people who are just starting out in their careers. Another one of your biggest mantras is finding mentors and seeking mentorship, as you mentioned in the past, finding those thought leaders and experts in whatever interest area you decide to pursue. How has how important has mentorship been in your career? And what advice do you have for finding and working with mentors? I know that you previously mentioned three types of mentors, and I would love if you could explain it to our students as well.
Yeah. So there are mentors and then there are sponsors. That's important to understand, especially in the workforce, right? And so let's break down mentors. Mentors are coaches, right? They're quarterbacks. You may have a mentor that is, and if you're in a sophomore in college, you could have a mentor who's a senior or junior, somebody very close to age, somebody very close to what you're doing, somebody that just has a little bit more world experience than you, but not significantly more, to help you kind of decide, hey, what I want to major in, the classes, what are some of the other things, that internships available, etc. Somebody to check in with, right? Then you start thinking about early career mentors, somebody that's just graduated, maybe a couple of years in the workforce. Okay, well, how was that process? How did you navigate that? What are some of the tips? Kind of once you're on the other side, you go to the dark side, right? What is the world like on that side? Um, and then you have somebody you can start thinking about, wow, somebody with a bit more tenure
Mhm.
who is now going to be a little bit more structured. That's going to be more like your coach.
Mm,
This person you're going to go to going, I have a plan and I've put in this, I've done this homework to come and have this conversation with you. I want to get here. Can you maybe, can you read this essay that I've written that I want to put, I have this idea of doing a startup. Here's my business plan. Do you have any ideas of where I can go pitch this to, et cetera? And then obviously the other one is, really tapping into the network for very senior professionals. You have to be respectful of their time. There are many of us out there, we would love to help, but you have to be respectful of our time. I often get folks show up going, well, I have a startup. How can you help me? And I'm like, well,
mm,
it's a little hard. Talk to me about what you have, and I'm
mhm,
going to push you. I'm going to challenge you. Have you gone to these three places? Have you read these resources?
mm,
Um, Pitch it back to me. We are going to be a little bit more. We're going to push, right? But those you want to use judiciously.
mm,
So there's that. And then there are obviously sponsors. You're going to find sponsors in college, in grad school, and in the workplace. Sponsors are people that actually do things to put you in a place in a room. So you
mm,
may have a professor that sees an opportunity come up, a fellowship, et cetera. They'll be like, Nishi, um, let's talk about this. This has come up. I think you're a great fit for it. This professor may have not been teaching you for a year, could have
right,
taught you classes like, a year or two ago, but
mm,
you keep in touch. And this professor is always your sponsor, knows where you want to go, what you want to do, and has got you, and mentions your name in rooms where
mm,
you're not there, right? And that
mm,
happens in the workforce too, sponsors that are there that are able to like throw your hat in the ring for certain things. So you want to kind of think about what the landscape looks like and who are those people for you? Like if you had to sit down and pen down and kind of create a quick doc that says, okay, I want my, three flavors of mentors. I want like the tenured, here's the coach, and then who are the sponsors for me today in college and grad school. And then if obviously, if you're entering the workforce at some point. The other thing is for those of you who have done internships, what are you doing with those people that you interned with? How are you keeping their network going? Networking is priceless. It
Right.
is something we don't learn early enough,
Mhm.
that people hire people like them.
Right.
People get to the workforce, they're going to recommend people like them. So
Mhm.
this actually is an interesting thing in implicit bias, because
Mm.
if the workforce is full of men,
Yep.
and full of men that are from certain demographics, then
Mhm.
they're going to refer people like them. And
Right.
this is what creates a very monochromatic environment in certain
Mhm.
like settings, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
something to be, we can't blame others if we don't put the work in to network.
Mhm.
I
Mm.
tell this to my girls, the two in college, and one in high school. That's a different story. Because no 16-year-old listens. But to my two girls in college, absolutely, like, network. It's important.
Um, Obviously, you believe very, very deeply in diversity and inclusion, especially you're a founding member of WISE at Zscaler. Um, on the topic of diversity and like people hire the same people who fit the same like category that they're in, how do you see the role of diversity and inclusion in the tech space evolving? Like 30 years ago, we were still trying to have these conversations and we're having them now. How does
Yeah,
this evolve? How do we continue to create impact along with the conversations that we have?
yeah. So one thing I want to say, I'm so inspired by Gen Z, is that you all have a bias for action. What you're doing with cheat code, so many of the things I see, so many folks in Gen Z, right? You have a bias for action. You are not Monday morning quarterbacks who are just talking about the things that you
Right.
want to do or critiquing, but you have a bias for action. You're doing things. I think that is where change happens. And Shelley Zallis, who is the CEO of Female Quotient, always says, um, we never talk about, when we talk about the word empowered, we
Mhm.
never talk about empowering men or boys,
Mm.
because boys already have the power.
Right. Mm.
And so she says, for young girls, we want to shift the narrative to I am in power. I'm
Mm.
right, rather than empowered, because it implies that power has to be given to you. The power is yours.
Yep.
It's what you choose to do with it. It is a real mindset shift, right?
Mhm.
To think about that. But let's look at the statistics. The National Science Foundation did a recent study, and the numbers, I just have it actually up here. 50 women make up 15% of the STEM workforce. 10% Black people, 9% Asian people. So you
Mm.
ask me 30 years ago, we were barely having these conversations because we were afraid to have the conversation.
Mhm.
30 years on, we are not only having the conversation, we're agitating change. We
Mm.
have a lot of work to do.
Agreed.
This is why folks like, me and others, many, many others, um, want to agitate change, right?
Mm.
But we're all in a certain stage in our careers. We need this generation to enter the workforce, to agitate change in academia and enter the workforce, understanding that you're going to take a place, an equal seat at the table,
Agreed.
right? No one is going to give you the power, it is yours to have.
Mhm.
And I think more companies are becoming aware. I mean, there's so many studies being done. There are DI targets, there are ESG targets that have to be met.
Mm.
And there's still much work to be done. And with the type of, classes that you're all doing and the degrees and the majors, we want to make sure all of you enter the workforce. That's
Mm.
the other thing. We don't want the attrition out of that. Well, I studied engineering, but you know what? I really don't want to do engineering.
Right.
Well, I studied physics, but I don't really want to do physics
Mm.
at work. I'm going to do a grad degree, I'm going to do something else. No,
Yep.
we really want you to enter the workforce, really want you to participate
Mm.
in, the tremendous work that there is, the exciting work that there is. And we want you to have the economic buying power
Mm.
that comes with that,
Mm.
right? Opting out of the workforce, opting out of, jobs that pay really well.
Right.
STEM jobs pay really well, right?
Mhm.
Tech jobs pay, takes away the ability for women and for minority groups, and for non-binary individuals to not participate in the global economy. This is
Yep.
serious stuff. So it is really important to start shifting the mindset to think about, how and why this is important. And
Mhm.
then we have a lot of skills gaps, like
Mhm.
cybersecurity, AI, new avenues. Like what AI does is it really widens the aperture for the number of, I would say, domains and majors that can really participate, right?
Mhm.
Linguistics is going to be super big right now as you enter, as you start thinking about localization and as we build on LLMs, right? Second piece of it is legal, ethics, AI ethicists, all of these type of areas where we never even thought would be in STEM will have a huge role to play. So I would say that, it is important to be thinking about exercising that power and
Mhm. Yep.
participating, in this, in these areas at this
Mhm.
stage.
I truly, truly resonate with that. I think a lot of us wait for an invitation to find a chair at the table. And I think that's so far from real. I feel like we should be going and taking that chair and sitting down. Um, well, on
And
that
if
note, I
you're
think
here, Nishi, go grab a stool and just make yourself known in the room.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. Um, on that note, I think we're gonna end our conversation today. I just have to say there's not a lot of senior leadership women out there like you who are willing to have these conversations with people like me and with people who are looking to create change. And on the topic of one of your favorite books, Legacy, you've built an incredible, incredible legacy for future women in the technology space. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I know you're very busy. Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Good luck, everyone.
Thank